The Bastard Munchen vs PXG match was phenomenal.
There were so many unexpected moments, and it felt like no one knew what was coming next.
On top of that, we saw a whole new set of ego discoveries and mind-blowing concepts that changed the whole game.
So in this video, we'll deep dive into everything we learned from the Bastard Munchen vs PXG match.
Let's start with originality, since that was introduced before the match started. Originality is a player's hunger. It forms their ego, and it becomes the root of their desires and what they want to accomplish in life. It becomes a big part in every player who played a crucial factor in that match.
And the next big Egoist discovery was during the Bastard Munchen and PXG match. After witnessing Charles and Shido's chemical reaction, Isagi was able to further break down the mechanics behind this super play.
From here, we see Isagi and Yuri break down and explain the process of achieving one's top performance. We even got this great chart showing how when a player possesses ego or hunger, the feeling of being a protagonist and the drive to achieve a reachable or suitable goal, they can enter a flow state. And from there, after achieving a flow state, this player could share a winning vision and link up another player who is also trying to be the protagonist of their own story. This is chemical reaction. When these chemical reactions are so good between these players, they can even bring out their top performance.
And after analyzing how to achieve a top performance, we see Isagi discovered the two ego categories, the world type and self-type egos. A self-type egoist is a player who is primarily driven by their own sense of personal desires, goals, and ambitions. Their goal motivates them to take action and push their limits, but it's not about global recognition. It's more about their own personal success and growth.
On the other hand, a world type egoist is a player who aims for the world standard and perspective instead of personal glory like the self-type egoist. The ultimate goal of a world type egoist is to stand out globally and use their skills to achieve greatness on the world stage. These players look to win trophies and high accolades that are recognized by the masses.
And then to add more on top of that, there's also two ego environments, freedom and restriction. The players situated in the freedom environment tend to be free thinkers. These players find it easier to display their abilities by coming up with multiple scenarios and then choosing the best one out of those options.
While players who are placed in the restrictive environment are the complete opposite. These players excel once they're given a fixed role and they faithfully follow this task until it's completed. And by utilizing all this new information, we can categorize every player's ego type and environment. Through this understanding, we can predict the requirements for a player's top performance as well as their weaknesses.
And that's not all. During the star change, we also learned the differences between talented learners and geniuses. Talented learners are naturally talented players who operate off logic and rationality. They follow frameworks to improve themselves. They are constantly adapting, growing, and refining their skills. These players are correlated to world type egoists.
A genius is a player with extraordinary natural ability and innate talent, and they possess intuitive understanding of the game, which allows them to outplay others naturally. These players are correlated to self-type egoists. We know that was a lot of information, but this match did have a lot of information. This match introduced a lot of new discoveries and concepts related to ego, which became crucial tools for Isagi's victory.
This video wouldn't be complete without mentioning Isagi's growth throughout the match, further highlighting his development and how he used these new tools to secure the win.
One of the main details of this match that grabbed our attention was Isagi's ability to mimic, but not only that, devour other players in the field.
This ability is so good that it's enough to truly convince other players that the person he is trying to mimic is actually there.
When it first happened with Rin, we didn't want to put too much stock into it. However, Isagi somehow convinced Ness that he was Kaiser in the final moments of that match.
And to break this down, in the midst of Rin wreaking havoc on the field in chapter 270, Isagi noted that only Itoshi Sai was able to stop Rin whenever he got into the Shore state, and that he needed to take on that role somehow. And in 274, we see Isagi tries to stop Rin, but ultimately gets cooked by him. Rin put Isagi on his ass and embarrassed Isagi.
This moment was a blessing in disguise for Isagi. After getting embarrassed by Rin, Isagi was pushed to rock bottom, and he was forced to evolve past his current limitations. Faced with adversity again, Isagi chose to rebel and fight against Rin. This interaction ultimately forced an awakening from Isagi, and we see him enter a new version of himself, the so-called genius of adaptability.
This is where we see in chapter 275 that Isagi's actually successful in becoming a presence like Itoshi Sai. In the heat of it all, Rin hallucinates and sees an apparatus of Itoshi Sai. Rin appeared to be in total shock, and it looks like the Shore state was actually switched off for a moment until he was able to come into his senses and saw Isagi through the apparatus of Sai. So what are we saying here? We're saying that Isagi's presence and ego was convincing enough to be reminiscent of Sai.
Isagi lived up to his declaration of becoming a presence like Itoshi Sai. He was able to convince Rin of his presence and became that new presence in his mind. He took over the rival and the abilities of Itoshi Sai in his mind. He became that spirit and that phantom that was haunting him. But it doesn't stop right there, because Isagi was able to do this again, but with Kaiser.
And Isagi's final goal can be seen as the perfect representation of this change that we saw. We can see he is using similar methods methods and thinking as his game winner in the U20 match. Back then, even Sai said to Ren after the match, he was able to bring out even your instincts. That's exactly what happened here, but at a higher degree of ability.
This time, Isagi goes up to the next level and he becomes the game's protagonist, a figure changing and directing the play and not just solely adapting to it. Yes, Isagi is still adapting to the field and the way it's changing, but he's also the game's protagonist now. And throughout the PXG and Bastard Munchen match, Isagi was the one dictating the pace of the game.
He was easily just one step ahead of everyone else, and he also anticipated the genius of Ness. Isagi being the adaptable monster that he is, he still believed Ness would be a factor in this match. Adding this with Ness's despair arc, Isagi knew that he could use the magician to his advantage.
This is where we see the huge contrast between Isagi and Kaiser as people. Isagi's always willing to adapt and change, while Kaiser was still reluctant to do this with his relationship with Ness. This time, Ness was rebelling, and he wanted to challenge Kaiser and make him into an emperor that fit his needs and desires. So Ness sent this complicated and unsuitable path that required Kaiser to evolve and adjust to Ness in order to execute it. Kaiser wasn't able to abandon this prior fixation and expectation from Ness, and he was unable to anticipate this type of path for him.
Isagi, on the other hand, believed in Ness being able to change this and try to become a better version of himself. Isagi's always willing to adapt, and he was willing to abandon his prior fixations so he can play with Ness under his own guidelines.
When that possibility finally started to manifest, Isagi was the first one to recognize it, and he moved just like how Ness wanted. He rushed into the PXG penalty box to score that long-awaited goal, and he did it by moving exactly like Kaiser. Isagi had to adapt to Ness's past to become the new king, as well as devour Kaiser just so he could fit into Ness's plans. This is the complete devour x devour I've ever seen. He was able to utilize two different players just so he can create his own game-winning formula.
Also, this was a great callback to the FC Barca match, where Isagi was watching Ness and Kaiser link up, and this was when Isagi stated Kaiser possessed his ideal playing style. From there, Isagi moved with the intent of devouring Kaiser.
This final play was a perfect full circle moment and representation of Isagi's NEL journey to devour and turn Kaiser into the naked emperor. He was able to go through all these trials and tribulations and learn so much, like egocentrism, protagonism, originality, what his original ego was, and the idea of winning. Obviously, he would like to win by his own goals as a striker, and he was able to prove that by devouring Kaiser and Ness in this final play, but he was also able to do that with Rin by devouring his own expectations and becoming a presence like Itoshi Sai. Isagi has just been evolving and transcending into a world-class player, and it's all thanks to these new concepts and his new understanding of sub-concepts like egocentrism, protagonism, originality. These concepts have pushed him into a much greater player.
And using all these concepts, Isagi is able to read and understand the motivations or protagonism behind people's playstyle, and from there, he can use this to his advantage by anticipating his opponents as well as bringing out the best of his teammates.
Which perfectly sums up the final panel right before his goal, the Neo-Egoist, controlling hope and despair. He uses all these concepts on the field and warps everything to fit his winning formula. A true villain. Let's give it up to Isagi Yoichi. This match has so much great elements, and you can see how important it's going to be in the future of Blue Lock as well.
Isagi is truly becoming a very scary player, and the player he's slowly developing into is truly going to be a menace for everybody he's up against. We are seeing that he's able to completely just bend the match to his own will, and I can't wait to see how this is going to manifest itself later on. What other players is he going to take on the appearance of and trick others into linking up with him, or similar situations like how we saw with Rin and Sai? Anything's really possible for this genius of adaptability.
All I have to say, I'm really looking forward to the U20 World Cup, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what type of plays that we come into, because I think they're all going to become prey to Isagi. Let us know what you guys think. We covered a lot in this video. There were a lot of concepts. There was a lot of talk about Isagi, of course, because he's that guy, he's the main character, but please let us know what you guys think in the comment section.
If you did enjoy the video, please consider giving a like, comment, or subscribe to the channel. And as always, we do have a link to our community Discord, and that link can be found in the description of this video below.
Thank you for sticking to the end. It's Tev.
And it's Lotus.
Peace.